Well, hello once again, and welcome back to Classic Dirt Bike TV. Now, last weekend we were south of the country to Kendal to cover the two-day Classic CCM event that was held at the Westmoreland County Showground, and that was a good weekend of classic racing, and the weather was superb over the course of the 2 days. But today we've made the journey to the Scottish borders, to Thornhill to be precise. Townfoot Farm is the location, and we're here today to cover the round 2 event of the Scottish Classic Motorcycle Racing Club's Championship. Now, the forecast for today is showers on and off, so hopefully it won't get too wet as the day progresses, but today you'll see racing from the pre-68 bikes. We'll also have a class for the pre-75s, and of course the pre-1984 bikes, or the twin shock machines as they were known back in the day, and we'll also have racing from the brand new 125cc class, which was recently introduced here for the 2021 championship. So it's all looking good for some good classic racing here at this round 2 event. So before we get into the racing, let's just take a quick look around the paddock and try and catch a glimpse of a few of those nice bikes that are soon to take part in this round 2 event here at Thornhill. So we're going to begin our paddock walkabout by taking a look at Billy Pentland and Jim Colligan's lovely trio of race machines. Now, this YZ 490 machine used to belong to the late and great Ian Robertson, but is now owned by Jim Colligan. Now, Jim uses that bike as a second bike to his 490 Michael, but Jim has decided to put the 490 Yamaha up for sale. So if you think that this is a bike that may suit you, and believe me, this bike is going for a very fair price, just give Jim a call on that number. Now, as far as I'm aware, Jim hasn't even raced this bike since he bought the machine from the Robertson family, so a very nice machine, and it was a very quick bike when Ian was riding it. In fact, I even thought about purchasing this bike myself, but unfortunately I have a full garage full of vehicles at the moment, so I've no place to put this lovely machine. But certainly this is going to be a fantastic buy for some rider who wants to purchase one of these lovely and of course very quick YZ 490 Yamahas. So if you maybe think that this is a bike that you may be interested in, then just give Jim a call on that mobile number. Now, over the course of my paddock walkabout at this round 2 event here at Thornhill, there were some very nice looking machines. Now, I never managed to capture every single bike in the paddock, but these are just a few of the nice machines I captured on the day. But this particular YZ 490, of course, was just one of the machines that Ian rode in his quite short racing career, but he absolutely loved these Yamaha machines, and as I said, he was extremely quick on this bike when he raced it during that time. But there you have it, an ex-Ian Robertson YZ 490, now owned by Jim Colligan, and is now offered for sale. Now, this next bike is Jim Colligan's number 1 race machine. Jim has been riding these 490 Michaels for many years, and some riders just suit these kind of machines, and Jim certainly falls into that category, and he just can't seem to get himself away from this 490. He's tried various other machines in the past, but Jim seems to always come back to these beloved 490 Michael twin shockers. Now Jim's 81 490 Mega 2 here is not, of course, a fully original bike from back in the day, and many of these 81 490s aren't original machines due to the age and all the many different parts that you can now buy for these bikes. And you can see that Jim's put a lovely set of YSS piggyback rear shocks on his particular bike, but a very quick bike when Jim's riding it. That's his 1981 490 Michael. Okay, next up we're going to take a quick look at Billy Pentland's YZ 490 Yamaha with the twin shock, of course, conversion. Now Billy did this conversion on this bike himself, and it was the first ever time that Billy took on this kind of engineering work, and he appears to be quite happy with the way that things have turned out. And it's a very unusual machine, this twin shock YZ 490 of Billy's. And of course, because now it has the twin shock conversion and the air-cooled motor and the front and rear drum brakes, this of course qualifies Billy to race this bike in the pre-1984 class. Now, the usual questions you get asked about this bike as to why you would want to change a perfectly good YZ monoshock Yamaha bike to a twin shock, and Billy's answer to that is quite simply, well, why not? But you can see some of the engineering work that's gone in to the swing arm to convert it to that pair of twin shocks, but nevertheless it's still a very nice looking machine, and of course very quick on the racetrack. But although the bike has this twin shock conversion, it still has many of the standard YZ 490 parts still fitted, like these drum brakes. But these YZ 490 reed valve motors didn't get a good reputation when they were first launched back in the day, but once you got the motors sorted out, then these were pretty potent pieces of kit to race on the track. Now, naturally, the wheels on Billy's machine are not standard. He's replaced them with a nice set of these black XL rims. But once again, another nice looking YZ 490. Maybe not to everybody's taste because of the twin shock conversion, but each to their own, and that's what of course makes us all individuals. But that's just another quick look at Billy Pentland's YZ 490 twin shock conversion. This is a bike, of course, that you may have seen on my YouTube channel previously. This is Kevin Smith's quite nice and quite rare 250 Michael Spider, and this of course is a 1983 machine. Not many of these old Spiders 250s racing on the track these days. Now, the Michael 250 reed valve engine with the gear driven crankshaft and clutch rather than the old primary chains that used to be fitted to these engines in the early days. But this is a sweet sounding little bike, and as I mentioned, quite rare because there's not many of these 250s still taking to the tracks these days, and this one of Kevin's is certainly in quite good original condition, although it does have a few replaced parts on this bike, but nevertheless it's still a nice looking bit of kit from 1983. Now, the brake back plates are CNC replacements, of course, but a lovely looking machine, and of course 1983 was the time when Michael were in very deep trouble financially, and it wasn't long after that the company went unfortunately down the toilet. Now the rear shock was one of the other troublesome parts on these 83 bikes, but once you got them sorted with a decent quality shock, it was quite decent suspension for its time. Now this alloy replacement tailpipe is not the original, but as I mentioned previously, many of these older Michaels don't have the original parts fitted, but this is Michaels dual control swing arm, which was what they called their rear suspension system for 1983. Now most manufacturers in 1983 had names for their rear suspension systems, and dual control was Michaels' interpretation of their rear suspension system. But as you can see, quite a nice looking machine, this bike of Kevin Smith's, and not only is it a nice looking machine, it sounds quite decent as well. So that was Kevin Smith's 250 Michael Spider from 1983. Now we're going to take another quick look at John Porteous's lovely Curtis 4-stroke Honda. Now this certainly looks like a big beast of a bike with that lovely Curtis frame with the Honda XR 500 motor in the chassis. And this of course is a genuine Curtis bike from back in the day, and quite a few of these big Hondas pass themselves off as being Curtis bikes, but many of them aren't. But this is certainly a genuine Curtis 4-stroke thumper, this bike of John Porteous's, and you can imagine just what kind of sound comes through that lovely megaphone exhaust when that 500 Honda engine gets fired up. Now a single cylinder of course with the twin port cylinder head, which leads into the single tailpipe at the rear. But once again another gorgeous looking twin shocker, and you can see John racing this bike in the pre-1984 class. Okay, our next pair of machines are a lovely couple of bikes belonging to Andy Mallock. Now the bike on the right of course is Andy's 250 Montessor Capra VF. Andy's quite recently just purchased this bike. I think it was about a year ago that Andy bought this bike. He already has a 414 Capra machine in his collection among a couple of Armstrong bikes, but this is Andy's preferred 250 that he races at these twin shocker events. Another quite rare bike in terms of being able to see these bikes on the track. You very seldom see these Montessors taking part in classic and vintage scrambles these days, but this is a nice original looking bike, this machine of Andy Mallock's. Now the Montessor 250 piston port motor, no reed valve on that engine of course, but as I said, this bike looks in quite near original condition. There's not too many of these old Montessors you see these days, and many of them are still in private collections, so it's nice to see one still taking part in classic scrambling. Now this second machine is Andy's spare bike or second bike. It's his lovely 360 CZ. Again, quite an original looking bike, although it has different rear shocks on the rear, but this is another quick bike, this Czechoslovakian two-stroke machine of Andy's, and this bike has not got too many trick parts fitted, although it has the upgraded gear shifter on the left hand side there. But Andy tends to switch between the CZ and his Montessor, and of course his 4-stroke Armstrong machines that he has in his collection. But again, another nice old CZ racer. And as I said, there's so many different upgraded and trick parts that you can buy for these CZs these days. You can sometimes even change the whole personality of the bike by fitting modern parts, but this particular example of Andy's looks quite original, apart from one or two replacement parts. Now I know that Andy's had this bike for many years, and as far as I know, it's never gave him any real mechanical trouble, and it's good to know that he's still using it at vintage race events. So it's quite nice to switch between the CZ or the 250 or 414 Montessor Capra and his Armstrongs whenever the need arises. But a nice pair of race bikes soon to take part in this Thornhill Scramble. Those are bikes belonging to Andy Mallock. Okay, our next bike is Alan Reed's lovely Mark 7 Bultaco. Now again, this bike is offered for sale, so if you think you might fancy this old Spanish classic to take to the track, then just give Alan a call on that number. Now Alan did tell me that this was a Mark 7, but this had the later Mark 8 engine in the chassis. But yet again, not many of these Bultacos being used on racetracks these days, and it's nice to see these old classics still taking to the track. Now I'm not sure about the alloy fuel tank on this bike. I always assumed that these Mark 7s had the fiberglass fuel tanks, but I'm sure my YouTube Bultaco experts will clear that particular question up very soon. And again, of course, these old Spanish Bultacos make quite a good starter bike if you'd like to get yourself into classic or vintage motocross. But this alloy fuel tank could of course just be a replacement to the original fiberglass items. Now an Amel concentric carburetor powering Alan's Bultaco, and a nice pair of Falcon rear shocks on the back. I had a pair of these shocks on my old Michael back in the day, and they were very good items. Now Alan's bike of course is maybe not a fully original bike from that period, but nevertheless a nice little racer, and certainly an interesting bike for somebody who wants to get in to classic racing. So if you think you might be interested in Alan's machine, then just call the number I previously posted. Okay, next up we're going to take a look at James Haddow's lovely little Cr125 Honda. Now this little bike of course is just one of the machines that's taking part in the brand new 125 two-stroke class that the Scottish Classic Motorcycle Racing Club have introduced for 2021. Now, as it stands at the moment, we just have a few bikes in this class at the moment, but we hope to increase capacity for these bikes as more people enter to race their 125s. Well, these little Cr125 two-stroke motors were just awesome little bikes, and they're still very popular with 125 racers at these kind of motocross events. And this is a nice example here of James Haddow's. Now, I don't know if it's an 89 or possibly even an 88 bike, but it's certainly thereabouts. But a very quick little bike on the racetrack, and as I said, extremely popular with riders in the 125 class. Now, you may remember that I posted some nice videos of these little bikes racing at the Westmoreland Golden Jubilee event a couple of weeks back, and they were very quick and quite a popular class at that 2-day event. And it was great to see these little screamers back out on the track once again. But a nice example there, that's James Haddow's little Cr125 Honda. Okay, the next bike we're going to take a look at is Graham Smith's RM400 Suzuki. Now, this machine is just one of two bikes that Graham often uses at these Scottish Classic race events, and he sometimes races the Suzuki, and he also has an IT Yamaha that he brings to these race meetings. But as you can see, Graham doesn't do bling on his machines. No shiny fancy parts on Graham's bike. These are purely purpose-built, down-to-earth race bikes. Now, I'm almost sure that this is a 1980 RM400. Certainly it looks and has all the proper panels, etc. for a 1980 RM. But these were, again, pretty good bikes back in their day in the early 80s, and they were pretty fast with these big 400 Suzuki two-stroke motors in the chassis. Drum brakes, of course, for 1980, and a nice alloy box section type swing arm. Now, Graham's bike isn't, of course, a fully original machine from that year, because it has a few different parts, including this D&G expansion chamber, but many of these older bikes these days don't have the original parts fitted from back in the day. But it's still good to see that these kind of bikes are still being used on the racetracks, and this RM400 of Graham's is quite a good example, although, as I said, not a fully original bike from back in the day, but a very quick machine. And you can see this bike in action on the racetrack in future postings here on my YouTube channel. Okay, next up we're going to take a look at Liam Lamb's 1975 250 Michael, an old vintage racer, and these old AW Michaels, or Alfred Wheel Michaels, were again pretty awesome machines in the 1970s. And as you can see, this old girl's got a few battle scars from her many years of racing on the track. The old Michael coffin-shaped alloy fuel tank, of course, the standard configuration for that 1974-75 bike. And the expansion chamber looks like it's had a few repairs in its life, but it's nice to see these old 1975 Michaels still taking to the track. But once again, this may be an old machine, but you can see Liam taking part in the racing at this event when I post all the racing footage from this round 2 event here at Thornhill, which will be my next video posting here on my classic Dirt Bike TV channel. But once again, not a fully original machine, but as I keep saying, it's quite rare to find an original one of these old Micos from back in the 70s, and it's more important to me really to keep these bikes on the racetrack in any type of configuration, whether that means having to fit replacement or reproduction parts just to keep them on the track. And you certainly don't get many of these 1970s Micos taking part in vintage racing these days, but it's good that the likes of Liam can keep these old bikes running and let us all have a look at what they were like back in the day. Okay, our final bike that we're going to take a look at from the Thornhill Round 2 paddock is this lovely Cr125 Kawasaki belonging to Ewan Davidson. Now I think this is a 1985 model, and by all accounts it looks very original from that year, with the little Kawasaki Cr125 motor with that Kawasaki KIPS power valve system, or the Kawasaki integrated power valve system to give it its full name, but this bike looks almost like it just came straight from the Kawasaki factory. Now back in 1985 these would have been fitted with a 34mm Mikuni carburetor onto a 6-pedal reed valve. Now I'm sure these had a 6-speed gearbox, these little KXs, with of course Kawasaki's revolutionary Unitrack rear suspension system. But we will take a much closer look at this bike in a future video here on my Classic Dirt Bike TV channel, so look out for that. Now I wasn't actually told if this was an original machine or a restoration bike, but nevertheless it's still a gorgeous looking little thing with a disc brake on the front, and quite unusually a drum brake on the rear, so I'm not exactly sure what Kawasaki were thinking in 1985 with that hydraulic disc brake on the front and the drum on the back. But this D&G tailpipe of course is not original to this machine. But these little 125 power plants for Kawasaki's KX from 1985 were again really powerful and very quick little motors, and they could rev to the moon and back no problem. But this is a lovely little example of an 85 KX, and as I said, we will take a much closer look at this bike in a future video here on my Classic Dirt Bike TV channel. So I hope you enjoyed having a quick look around the paddock at this round 2 event here at Thornhill, and don't forget to retune to see all the racing action from this event, which will be my next video posting. So once again, thanks for your time, and thanks for watching Classic Dirt Bike TV.